She's really good. Wow. So we have tons of things in common, but it's like yeah. I just want to be so slide more. Did you make this slide? Yes, right. Oh, Is it your wife? Is it your wife? It's crazy. Wear sweaters. We told you guys we're finding it cold enough to wear sweaters. You didn't believe us. It's only cold in the morning. It's do you have the except for you, yeah. Where are we in this? In the morning, I will kind of like take it outside. Then like just like warming outside. Sorry, shopping. Can we do one talk in America? Yeah, we did. Thank you. This is also a big part. Tell John Weiss. He's coming. Okay. I heard his voice. How are you? I'm good. I'm writing. I'm busy writing. They're going to inspire you. They're going to inspire you. Yes. I've always wanted to go there. I know it. Spent some years in the army. Switching out, yeah. Well, you know that, okay. no need to do that. It's heavy.
I'm gonna go share.
You just tell us when, Chris, and then we'll start. Those of you who are here and on social media and want to live tweet this event, that would be very beneficial for the fellows, or take Instagram photos or whatever you so choose. Our hashtag is Cronkite HHH. You can also find us at Cronkite Global. Of course, a Facebook page, Instagram accounts, Twitter accounts. We don't have Snapchat yet. Thank you. All right, well, thank you for coming and spending the next hour with us in what we think will be an invigorating and informative session. I think the topic today is nothing's more important out of the headlines than talking about this issue, and we've got some global experts to do that. My name is Dr. Bill Silcox. Thank you also to those who are watching on the webinar, literally from around the world. I'm the Assistant Dean, and this is the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University. Michael Crow is the president of the university, has 8 design aspirations for the new American university. And you guys can't see this, but right above the fellow's head, the 8th is engage globally. We do that through the Humphrey Fellowship Program. It's part of what we do at Cronkite to be able for our students, faculty, and staff to see the world, know the world, then they can report the world. A lot of our students will never be able to get out of the United States during their education year. So this year, as we have in the past, we literally bring 12 countries to them through the Hubert H. Humphrey Fellowship Program, named after Hubert H. Humphrey, who of course was vice president under Lyndon Johnson, ran against Richard Milhous Nixon, and lost in 1968. He could have retired, he didn't. He went back home to Minnesota, became a more empowered, invigorating senator than he already had been during his distinguished political career. And then when he passed away in 1976, Jimmy Carter said, we need to honor this great statesman, and hence the Hubert H. Humphrey Fellowship Program. At the Cronkite School, we've had 80 fellows from 53 different countries. This is our current class. This is where they were last October in the beautiful Ben Franklin building at the U.S. State Department, meeting with diplomats, fellows, because this is not the only Humphrey program. We're also on 12 other campuses around the country. The fellowship year is designed for them to take what they already have done professionally and what they already know about leadership and expand it. They do that through faculty mentors like Professor Andrew Lucky, who's joined us here, or through visiting with host and friendship families, having experiences out in the community, doing public service, and of course doing professional affiliations. It's part of the Fulbright family program, and all of these concentric circles hopefully improve everything the fellows do. Our series of Cronkite Global Conversations begins today and will continue through the rest of the next 3 or 4 weeks. We hope you will join us each and every time that we come together for this event. Our first topic, refugees, risks, challenges, and opportunities. To do that, we've got 4 of our great fellows who come from diverse parts of the world, as you can see from behind me on the screen. And I ask you, as you listen to them, save your questions towards the end, but let's see if we can find some common themes and perhaps even some solutions to what really are today's global problems. I'll turn the time over to Ahmed from Egypt. And again, hopefully you will tweet about this and follow this, my friend.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bill, for the introduction. I would like to introduce my colleagues first who are going to do the presentation with me today. Paul from Kenya, Kazi, Bangladesh, Marina, Bosnia. Thank you very much, guys, for being here. I would like to start my presentation with few introduction and sometimes misunderstanding. Like some people, they don't know the difference between refugees and immigrants. There are so many legal implications to both terms. The term by law, refugees cannot be sent back to their country where their lives are endangered. And we see for some time that like in Europe, politicians they refer to refugees as immigrants because like they want to be more flexible with deporting them. So there's like lots of implications here. I'm gonna show you guys a video from the UNHCR, and this video has like few numbers like and facts about refugees.
Speaking for those forced to flee in staggering numbers. 2016 was the third successive record-breaking year. One person is forcibly displaced every 3 seconds. That's 65.6 million people. 22.5 million refugees, the highest number ever recorded. 40.3 million displaced inside their own country. On average, 1 in every 113 people is now displaced, equal to the 20th most populous country in the world, bigger than Britain. Some crises, Somalia, Afghanistan, Myanmar, stretch over decades. Others accelerated this century: Democratic Republic of Congo, the north of Central America, Iraq, Syria. 2/3 of its people are now displaced.
عمل صعب ومجبور مشان ولادي، يعني حتى ولادي صعب لما يكونوا جوعانين مثلا وقت العشاء او كذا او الفطور.
In 2016, new crises erupted in Nigeria and South Sudan. South Sudan, the world's newest nation, trapped in war and famine, and the fastest growing displacement crisis anywhere. In 2016, over 700,000 people fled to Uganda, Ethiopia, Sudan, Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Kenya. The total of refugees from South Sudan is now more than 1.9 million. Since 2013, another 1.9 million people have been displaced inside the country. Sarah fled famine and fighting.
There's a lot of war, people have died. That's why we come to Juba. I just pray, let them make peace. Let us go back to our motherland.
It falls to neighboring, often poor or middle-income countries to host these millions of displaced. Turkey, more than 2.9 million. Pakistan, 1.6 million. Lebanon, over 1 million. Uganda, over 900,000. Many remain for years. The number of people seeking asylum stood at 2.8 million in 164 countries. 75,000 were children on the road, and 1 of every 2 refugees is a child. 2016 was the year 193 nations committed to a renewed approach to these ongoing crises. They signed the New York Declaration to intensify their cooperation to protect and to find solutions for refugees. The key goals: more investment in refugee hosting communities, fostering refugee inclusion through jobs, education, and opportunities, continued commitment to resettlement, new pathways to solutions.
This video gives us kind of overview about the numbers and how many people are displaced.
Hey guys, how's it going? Today I'm going to show you my awesome new Rick's website. It's got everything I love all in one place. Well, of course that means you too, Maddie.
So you guys, this is he didn't pay us anything to do that. So as you guys saw in the video that the numbers are really shocking, and so many people are leaving their countries or even like going to other places in their own countries because of the war. For the past 7 years, like Syria has been the biggest refugees place. So like lots of people from Syria, like they flew to other countries, like they were hosted by Turkey, Lebanon, Egypt, where it came from, where there actually like actual problems on the ground. So in Egypt, for example, we had like the Egyptian revolution, and we had like another uprising in 2013 against the Muslim Brotherhood. People were very frustrated with their policies. They were very angry at them. And then because like we had a large number of Syrians in Egypt, it was very difficult to them because they started like to participate in the protest. The economy is not that good, so some people like paid like some other people to take part in the protest. So like Egyptians were very frustrated. So it started like kind of tensions between the Syrians, and like Egyptians thought that Syrians were supporting the Muslim Brotherhood groups in Egypt. So after the political climate turned sharply against Syrian refugees who were accused of supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. Another facts in Egypt that we don't share borders with Syria, like we don't have land borders with Syria, but like we host around 100,000 and 130,000 refugees, and these are the official numbers. But then we have the government reported that we have even like maybe double this number in Egypt. The government is taking like policies regarding reunifications of families, so we would like be easy on Syrians coming to Egypt to be with their families, like their parents, their kids. Being a refugee in Egypt, is they don't live in camps, so they live like with the other Egyptians, but then the economic situation is not that great. The poverty rate is very high, so they might face like higher maybe like risks, but like rather than being in a camp, because like the economic situation. And when they come to Egypt, like they are cheap labor, so like they would like take jobs Egyptian wouldn't take it for the same pay grade. So this creates kind of social tensions between Egyptians and refugees. And then they get like really frustrated with the situation, and they decide to leave. They decide to leave like illegally by sea, like they are hoping to get to Europe through the Mediterranean. And like lots of refugees like die in the process, but like the Egyptian government, like they don't take take strict policies against these refugees, so like they won't like be arrested, they won't be imprisoned, but then it's a big problem, and they put their life at risk by doing this. And now I will hand the presentation over to my friend Marina. Thank you.
You can clap a little bit. Well, as Ahmed said, situation in the Middle East, and especially when we talk about Syrian crisis, were really a completely disaster back to 2014, and many of them decided to try to find their new home in European Union. So when we speak from journalist perspective, I would say that in 2014, in my newsroom and across the Western Balkans region, nobody was prepared for this kind of influx of refugees. And of course, European Union, they tried to invest 2 billion euros in defenses, in high-tech technology, in border patrols, but they didn't invest a lot of money in actually preparation how to host all of these refugees. And during summer 2014, my TV company, Al Jazeera Balkans, from time to time reported about refugee, but mostly that happened like accidentally stories when journalists tried to report about Greece economic crisis, which were as on the scale of how I described here, just to find, Great Depression scale. So when they tried to report about how people in Greece survived that economic crisis, suddenly they realized that a lot of refugees were on the islands, in the parks, around schools, and editors probably, of course, tried to identify with those stories and publish them, but still we didn't understand what's going on, what will be our next year in 2015. And what is important to say from law perspective, European Union followed Dublin regulation, which means that refugee should stay in the country where they arrived in first. That means that 2014 and 2015, mostly refugees came to Greece and Italy, and that put a lot of pressure on the borders country, and of course, desperate and hungry people replaced luxury tourists on Greece islands. But even though deadliest month was April 2015, European Union didn't try to do a lot to save all of these lives, and they just switched Mare Nostrum Italian rescue operation with Frontex, but still people died on the sea. I put like a few facts and figures here, but however, I would argue that one picture set a new tone in 2015. Do you know maybe which picture changed some kind of conversation and some kind of perspective about this crisis?
The picture of the boy on the shore.
Yeah, that's true. This picture, I would say, set a new tone when we talk about EU approach to refugee crisis. And unfortunately, this toddler from Syria died with his older brother and 3 more kids, just in 2 small boats. They tried to reach out from Bodrum in Turkey to island coast in Greece. And this picture made the global headlines September. Just 2 days later, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that German will not follow this Dublin regulation. That meant that refugees could stay in Germany and or in Austria, because usually before that announcement, they would turn back in the first point they arrived in Europe. That means like Italy or Greece. So what does that mean for my part of the world? That's the Western Balkans. You can see here, it's we call that ex-Yugoslavian country, or now a new term in political one, a Western Balkans country. So mostly refugees in 2015 came from Turkey to Greece, and then across Macedonian border, and went to Serbia, and then some of them went to Croatia, some of them to Hungary. But however, that put a lot of pressure here on Greece-Macedonia border, of course here on Serbia and Macedonia border. And just in 2050, I found one info that 600,000 refugees were registered in Preševo camp. Preševo is on this border, Serbia-Macedonia. That means that every 20 human being, woman, child, or man, was actually refugee in Serbia. We talk about like the largest country in this region, but still it's just 10 million population. So that put a lot of pressure on government and of course on citizens who try to find their way to survive in developing country with a bad economy and lack of health and education support. Of course, illegal border crossing happened but even now, human traffickers still find their way to make some money of refugees. And key components of crisis management fell to non-EU countries is because, like European Union with Croatia here, they didn't consider those countries as a border, as a part of Europe, as a way that they actually support those countries to help refugees to survive and find a new home and new way to live in. But also authorities from Macedonia and from Serbia try to figure out how to manage all of these crises. So in 2015, in summer, they started to register refugees and asking them, like, what is your wish destination? And of course, mostly they answered German, France, Sweden. So they explained, like, we don't have a capacity, and of course we don't want to handle this crisis. It's a European Union problem, and we will just like give them opportunity to leave this region. But even here in audience, we had a few people who came in America in refugees back to the 90s, because this region had a war from 1992 to 1996, Croatia some earlier. But however, we already were exposed to those kind of pictures, and this refugee crisis isn't something new and special one. So very often journalists identify all of those stories with their own stories. And in November 2015, Macedonia tried to play it hard and then decide like who actually deserve to pass through this region. So they decided it will be just people from war places such as Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan. So that, of course, spread a lot of anger and desperateness in all of these camps across the Western Balkans. So now I'll show you just how journalists try to report about all of these stories and try to actually put their efforts that officials, especially in our countries, gave some support to refugees, because mostly support came from citizens, not from government. And maybe Ahmed, you can help me. I have to go. Okay. The first story I choose here is from Macedonia. It's not in English, so yeah, you can see like what kind of picture we saw. No. Oh, okay, sorry. And this lady reported like 3 months every single day. And our crew and herself very often said they, at the end of the day, stay without clothes, without jackets, without shoes. They try to give whatever they have for kids, for people who were dying or fighting violence were spread out. And it was a summertime, so many of them were like taking kids with them, and they didn't have a lot of water and clothes and feed, whatever they could help them. And she even told me that like 3 times she helped that 3 women gave a birth, and few people died in front of her eyes. And after like 3 months, she was completely exhausted, and she even had a stroke. So this summer also we published one documentary film awarded by few economies. By few European Association of Filmmakers. So one author from Outer Balkans started from Greece, and he followed, Marina Ridjic, his author, followed refugees on their way to all Western Balkans route. And then he discovered like in which kind of conditions they live in, and how local residents help them or even fight with them, and how human traffickers jumped in front of every corner and tried to use illegal route to, and of course, to make some money to help them. So he even filmed one death on the train, because usually refugees would follow the train, and of course, train eventually killed someone. So in March, in early March, Western route were officially closed. That means that Germany, Austria, other Western countries said we cannot accept any more refugees. We had more than 1 million something. So that route was closed, and many of refugees, even now, like I found 60,000 people were stuck in that region. Just in Serbia, 10,000. And this is a package from Belgrade, its capital city of Serbia, where even now you can see in the main park close to Central Station how many refugees live in like empty building. They try to brush their teeth or even have a shower during the winter outside. They cannot go in European Union, and still they don't want to turn back. So they are just stuck for some of them more than 1 year. And this is just one of reporter in which kind of conditions they lived, as I said, sometimes more than 1 year. And during this half a year, I discovered digital world. As Dr. Bill asked you, please use Twitter and Snapchat and publish everything what you think about this topic or about our speech, let's say. But My question was for people from AJ Plus in San Francisco. It's like digital department. How you could report about refugee crisis from such a long distance? Like, if you have this in front of your eyes, as a journalist, it's a tricky part because you have to stay independent and accurate and don't identify with those stories. But it's not human being thing that you can see that someone like died in front of you and be cool and be so independent. But from the other side, it seems that you are completely disconnected if you just watch for every single day a lot of these pictures, but it's like European Union stuff, or it's in Egypt problem, or it's some kind of African refugees. You cannot see that people or even help them. So I would say this package is interesting answer, how you could actually put yourself in that position and maybe have a better overview of what's going on the field. Now I need the sound. Maybe it's a little bit too long, but we can stop it.
This is me almost getting hit in the face with a noodle. It's just one of the many lovely encounters I've had with food. Oh my God. Yara, what are you eating? But for 1 week, I tried eating like a refugee. I attempted what's called the ration challenge. That means I lived off the same food rations handed out to Syrian refugees by an Australian NGO and observed the effects it had on my body. It was actually really hard. Brain just hurts. I was constipated, very lethargic, and at times miserable. How did I get involved in this? Well, at AJ Plus, we cover the refugee crisis closely.
They've been on this road since September.
And although I've even made videos about refugees, I've always felt disconnected from their struggles. So when my coworker Christina suggested I take the ration challenge, I thought, maybe, perhaps, possibly, I catch the tiniest glimpse of what they go through every single day. The food rations were sent to me in a package.
Okay, so this is Yara. This is really, really light. Do you want to feel it?
That's lentils. Before I unboxed it, though, I thought I'd get some tips from people who had already completed the challenge, which raises money to pass out the exact same food rations to Syrian refugees. What am I getting myself into?
You're getting yourself into a week of
Frustration.
you're going to be hungry, you're going to be tired,
Okay.
you will never feel full or satisfied.
Good luck. In fact, I got to opening the box. I'm supposed to eat whatever's in this box. That included sardines, red lentils, fried chickpeas, oil, red kidney beans, and rice. And some extra rice and flour that I had to supply myself. Altogether, the instructions said the meals contained a little over 1,700 calories per day. But something was noticeably absent. I wonder how much salt and pepper I can use. Salt and pepper. Salt and pepper. Salt and pepper. Salt and pepper in here? Nope. There were recipes for a number.
Really interesting video. So if you want to watch all of these, you can find that at AJ Plus webpage. And now we have to stop because we have 2 more speakers to show us their topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marina. Okay, I'll start talking, I think. So for Ahmed was, hi, I'm Kazi, I'm from Bangladesh, as Ahmed told. Ahmed was telling us about the refugee crises we are having in the world last few years, especially in Europe, Africa. The latest one, which actually happened and actually blasted in 2017, that was not included. And I'd like to take you through the latest refugee crisis that the world is having, the Rohingya crisis. Rohingya crisis is happening in Myanmar, and the Rohingya ethnicity, they are fleeing to Bangladesh. So it's kind of in between the 2 countries. So first of all, I'd like to take you to the Rohingyas who are there. Rohingyas are the ethnicity, they are the minor ethnicity who are called the largest stateless people in the world, most persecuted people in the world. And of course, according to United Nations, it is the world that this crisis is the world's fastest growing refugee crisis. So these are the Rohingya people. They live in actually Rakhine. Rakhine is the state, and Rohingya is the people they're called. But unfortunately, there are 135 minority groups in Myanmar, but the Rohingyas, they are not included in that country, so they don't have citizenship. They are living in Myanmar as early as 12th century, but still they're not given any basic needs for a citizen, for a human being, whatever it is. So latest in August 2017, the month actually we started our fellowship here, there was a violence in the Rakhine state, a renewed violence, I should say, because it has something to do, the violence started in 1962 by the military junta of Myanmar that actually forced 200,000 Rohingya refugees into countries like Bangladesh, Malaysia, and Indonesia, mostly 3 countries. So in August 2017, there were renewed violence by the Myanmar government. I should say a military part of the government, because it's a collaborative government with Aung San Suu Kyi. So there was renewed violence, including reported rape, murder, and arson. So, from August 2017 to November 2017, more than 1 million Rohingya refugees was actually forced to flee from Myanmar to Bangladesh. So Rohingya, why they are not considered as a citizen, why they are not given the basic rights of living, I'd like to give a brief background of that. So they speak a dialect that the Myanmar Buddhist. Myanmar is a country of like Buddhist. Buddhism is their main religion. Their language is also like that. But Rohingyas, they are Muslims, first of all. So they are minor in their religion. They speak a language that is called Rohingya. That is not actually Bengali. That the Myanmar government says they speak Bengali, but that is not Bengali. That is Rohingya, and that is not actually something they got from Myanmar or from Bangladesh. It's kind of a middle of a language. I tried to figure it out yesterday. That is, do I get the properly, because I speak Bangla, I know, but it is something in the middle. There is some Bangla dialect. There is some like the Myanmar dialect also. So this is the poor Rohingya. This is the Rakhine state, I should say. So whenever they are forced to flee, they flee to Bangladesh, and that part of Bangladesh, and that part is actually the Bay of Bengal. So they cannot go to much, like they cannot flee much because of the water, but still they try to go to other places like Malaysia and all that. They are not considered citizens, so they have some basic problem. They have no legal documentation from the Myanmar government. They have restrictions on marriage, like they have to take permission from the government to get married. So for that, they have to bribe the government officials. They have to give the picture of the bride and the groom, especially the bride without a headscarf. That is actually kind of not in the Muslim religion. They put on headscarf. So when you take a picture without headscarf, that kind of hurting their religious beliefs. So they have restrictions on family planning also. They cannot take more than 2 children. They have restrictions on employment, education, religious beliefs, and of course freedom of movement. If they want to go to another state, they have to take permission from the authority also. So it's kind of all basic needs, all basic things they are deprived of. So as a result, Rakhine is the poorest state of Myanmar, with 78% of poverty rate, where other in the whole country it's like 30 or 35% poverty rate. So In 2000, in a report from UN, it is said that they are the population that was persecuted most so far in the history. That is something actually that has been told by the aid organizations, UN, and all that. But that is something I hardly could find a very good report in the media, and that was really something shocking for me as well. This is one of the pictures of a dead Rohingya kid. I think they're crossing the rivers. There's a small river called Nav that they used to cross and come to Bangladesh. So like this, there are like so many of dead people, especially children, because there are a lot of children and women in the Rohingya community. So they are like in severe threat condition. So I would like to give a background of this and timeline of this crisis, starting from 1962, when the military rule began in Myanmar. So in 1962, 200,000 Muslims were forced to cross the country into Bangladesh. Those 200,000, they are already citizens of Bangladesh. Bangladesh government has given them citizenship earlier. In 1982, the Myanmar government they passed another new law, citizenship law, that actually identified 135 national ethnic groups, but Rohingyas were not one of them. So effectively, they are from 1982, they become more like stateless again. In November 2010, Aung San Suu Kyi was freed from the military. She was confined in the military by the military government. She was freed from that. Interestingly, I just want to share, I was searching Aung San Suu Kyi, she was a Nobel laureate for peace, all of you must know that. So yesterday, I just, Suu Kyi, I typed in Google, and the next thing came genocide. I was so surprised because there have been accusation of genocide in the country, not only forcefully freeing them, killing them, raping, burning their house, villages, and all that. And as Marina, she was telling about reporting, I think journalism is also challenged in these kind of situations, because Myanmar government has totally denied any kind of entry of the journalists from around the world, of the UN organizations, and all other things that can actually bring what is happening inside the Rakhine state. We hardly could see what is going on there. We could only see when they're coming back. We can hear from them. We can see their suffering. So it was kind of a one-sided thing. And I think journalism nowadays, they should find out ways to bring in front of the whole world the kind of situation people go through, especially this kind of people who are in trouble, who are suffering. So going back in June 2012, there was a religious violence again in Rakhine state, and 200 people were dead, mostly Rohingyas, and 150,000 again become homeless. So this has been a continuous process since 1962. So again in 2014, there's still some kind of pressure on Myanmar government to take their Rohingyas into citizenship and do not torture them. Still, there was no positive signs going on. In 2014, Myanmar conducted its first census among after their liberation. There was no Rohingyas count. And in November 2015, they had their first vote, democratic elections, and Rohingyas couldn't actually vote for them. So these are the timelines, these are the situations, these are the events that actually denied any kind of human rights to the Rohingya state. So in October 2016, actually, after all this, what should I say, all this oppression and all that, in October 2015, some Rohingya militants, they started making a militant group, and they actually started to fight against their government. And that actually gave the government more reason to oppress them, to actually make them flee the country forcefully. So in August 25, 2017, Myanmar state media reported 12 security officers were killed by the Rohingya militant group, and actually after that they actually the whole Rohingya state, the villages, they were burned down by the military of the military and the government also. And obviously Suchi was totally silent the whole time. She didn't say anything to media. She didn't talk about that. Only once she talked in September 2017, and she told that there is nothing wrong is happening in Myanmar. Everything is going fine. So the Myanmar government and the military was just trying to control the rebel Rakhines. That is all. So I'd like to also show some videos. I don't know. Okay, this is one of the drone footages I've got, where Rohingya refugees are entering Bangladesh from Myanmar by like walking. This is the footage from September. With whatever little, sorry, the video doesn't have sound, whatever little thing they have, they're escaping their country. Where is the presentation? Sorry for this. And the last one I want to just and this is the refugee camp that Bangladesh has, and people are living with severe bad condition, health threats like diarrhea, cholera, all that things are happening. And most importantly, women and children are very much under threat of like health. And one interesting thing, the amount of Rohingya women were raped in Myanmar, that is really alarming, because according to UNHCR, in 2018, 48,000 newborn babies will be there that are mostly rape, would be, what do I call it, like rape child. That is really threatening. This is how they're living there in Bangladesh. And I should also mention Bangladesh is like having really bad time with handling like more than 1 million of Rohingya refugees, because Bangladesh has, being a developing country, it has its own problems. So this is not something very, they welcomed, wholeheartedly they welcomed, but they do not want to actually keep more Rohingyas in their country. So latest what happened, I'll just give a quick wrap, Paul will be following up. There has been a repatriation deal between Myanmar government and Bangladesh under United Nations supervision. But as Marina told, that the refugees had to agree to the countries they are going. So whenever they were asked, so it started in January, but they were asked about going back to Myanmar, but most of the refugees, they denied, because they wanted citizenship, they wanted their lost properties back, so they didn't want to go back to Myanmar, so the repatriation actually stopped again. So the thing is still hanging in there. So this is, till date, this is the latest of the refugee crisis, and the life they're having is not really something very good. And we have to think about that, being sitting here in the like most developed country in the world. It's really tough to get all the pictures from here. But I'd really love people talking more about this. I'd really love to see some really good journalism about the refugees, and that is something actually might help us. Paul is taking to the next one. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Paul Udoto. I'm from Kenya. The first Kenyan Humphrey fella, is the Cronkite. And quickly, I have a couple of voices to help us get a feel of what people are saying about this global problem. The first quote is by the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and she says, if Europe fails on the question of refugees, it won't be the Europe we wished for. This is a challenge to the whole identity of the European values, the values for which, I mean, the European Union values for which it was set up to help the downtrodden and the persecuted. And so if it fails in this big international issue, it's a question on that. The next two quotes are from two Americans, one the president and one a citizen. So this President Donald Trump. We are not admitting in our country the very threats our soldiers are fighting overseas. That's one perspective. The other perspective by a citizen, we need to keep this country safe, but we should do that by focusing on people who actually pose the threat. That is by the founder of Facebook, Mark. Then quickly, some other comments. So German, American speaking, now a refugee speaking from a refugee's perspective. We Syrians don't want sympathy or aid. Just give us work permits. This is a Syrian refugee called Foz Hamama in a Jordanian camp. And I'll be mentioning in a short while why Jordan and Uganda are countries of interest with regard to how they've dealt with this problem. The same person again says, if I could get a decent job and a decent wage, I wouldn't even consider going to another country. That's the same Syrian refugee speaking. Then the last quote is from a British International Development Secretary, Justin Greening. He says, providing hope where refugees already are is the best assurance. So that should be food for thought for us as we deal with this international problem. Just a quick statistic. More than 65 million people have been displaced around the world. We're talking about people, not vehicles, not computers. People with blood, people with hopes, people like yourselves, people like you and me. And that is more than any other time since World War II. Now, we've made the refugee crisis seem like it's only a problem. It's not necessarily just a problem. There are opportunities within it, including even supposed conspiracies. So there are those who felt the German reaction to the refugee problem is a conspiracy and is doing it in its self-interest. But if you look at the population dynamics, there is an opportunity in how different countries are able to benefit from the presence of refugees in their countries. For example, America's open immigration, as much as America now is fearing refugees, has helped it to maintain a relatively healthy age structure compared to Japan, which is in a sense committing a slow demographic suicide. So Americans should be happy that the refugee problem has actually been a boon to this country. And those who have not enjoyed this, there are factors that are pushing people which we can quickly look at. This is war, oppression, civil disorder, poverty, environmental degradation, as well as discrimination. Quickly, we've had this sense of oversimplification that refugees and the immigrants are necessarily the bad guys. They are not. It's been found that the migrants who are reaching Europe via Italy are often the richer and better educated, looking for opportunities. They have hopes in their lives. So that boy you saw on the shore and he was said to have died, that boy could have been Steve Jobs. What Steve Jobs did to America, that boy would have done that either for America or any other country if he had been allowed to leave. And that's the sort of opportunity that there is in immigrants. Then the last thing I would like to talk about are the models that work very quickly. Uganda, which is neighboring to Kenya, where I come from. We've had challenges in Kenya with Kakuma and Dadaab refugee camp. Now, Uganda is the model of how refugees can be integrated into the community. And so 1/5 of refugees in Uganda are employing people outside of their families. They've moved from agriculture, they are in manufacturing, and they've become part of that society. The other place where we have the refugee problem being sort of very creatively worked on is Jordan, where with a trade-off with the European Union, they are able to have special economic zones where the refugees are gaining employment. So when we are thinking about refugees, it's not just a problem, it's also an opportunity of dealing with demographic problems. But as we get refugees at our shores, at our doorsteps, at our borders, we should also think about their education needs, employment, their health needs, and so on, because they are human beings like you and me. And so the country that we are holding up for coming up with a model that is working, we saw about the 900 refugees, is Uganda, that has provided refugees with a home away from home. So as a global problem, we should not look at the refugee crisis as a problem. Yes, there are inherent risks. Just like any other population, the refugees come with some of the problems from their countries, but they also come with a lot of opportunities, and it's important that we look at creative ways of dealing with this crisis. I want to stop there, and so the next and final bit is just some sort of question and answer for us to be able to respond to questions from the floor.
Go back up there and just stand up only because the folks watching on the webinar want to see it. You can be the panel of experts, which they are. Fire away with your questions, please. And take your cookies while you're thinking about questions.
I know Professor Lecky has one.
Oh, a cookie? Since it's been mentioned in many of these cases, the fact that the government itself is struggling with many issues, as you mentioned, in many of these countries. Can you really not look toward the government in many of these countries because it is, in terms of refugees, it is not a popular position for anyone running a country to take, that therefore, in my mind, pretending it doesn't exist. It's almost like being elusive about it. So is there hope in the governments? Is there a chance of them coming around more to be involved? Or do we really have to look from the outside for steps to be taken to help the people who are in camps and across borders?
I can quickly take that. It works best when this is not left to a single country to shoulder the burden. It's very good what you saw about the UN resolution in New York, about working on a collaborative sort of arrangement where if a single country is overwhelmed by the population, there are creative ways of dealing with it, but from a collaborative sort of approach rather than leaving it for a single country, because that has its inherent problems.
I would just add with Paul, the kind of help other countries or the organizations give, that is, I think, something actually short term. There is no full-time solution for this, because the kind of, I've seen the kind of aids countries like US, Canada, Norway, or UK, they are sending to the refugees. That is actually, that rarely goes more like 1 year for the refugees, the amount of refugees the country is having. So the full term is actually finally longer. In longer term, it's about the government of the country, of both the countries. So it is something the governments actually have to take care of.
I would add to this, like it depends on the government or which country. Like you cannot compare Bangladesh to Germany, for example, like the resources they have in the country. So I wouldn't say like there was a definite answer to the question. Like I would say like it depends on the situation, the resources in each country. So then the comparison might be fair at this point.
Yeah, just in my region, Western Balkans, back to 2015, had a lack of international support, not just by government like German government or Austria, by international big organizations who are actually focusing on refugee crisis. They didn't visit Western Balkans issues. They actually, most of them waited on the European Union border. Like when they finally arrived, whoever could arrive finally, we could help them, but like we could handle that situation. We will wait for that. Like for example, 500 kilometers, you can find just one crew for people, maybe just one of them is doctor.
Is poor coverage by journalists of the issues and what is actually happening, does that contribute to it? Why less action is taken? Because it's so sporadic and it focuses on things that don't really give the bigger picture. What do journalists have to do?
I'm not sure that we as journalists, for example, from Western Balkans, of course, we report in our language, or people even from Bangladesh, could set some agenda in New York or in DC when a big organization such as Red Cross or International Immigration and
even it's here.
Yeah, that they actually provide some money and restructure their budgeting for next year or for this month. If we report, we really, I believe, did an amazing job, especially when we take a look how many stories we've published and how many people and from different sides we had in front of our cameras. But still, if somebody provides budget in Switzerland or in Germany, they don't care about report from Western Balkans.
Yeah, I would add with that, it's not about only journalism, I guess, because regionally the countries are, like in Asia, there are countries like China, there are countries like India who are the most influential. So they have their own interest in certain kind of like regional politics. That actually also, I think, hamper the stand of a particular country that can make some real big contribution. So in the Rohingya crisis, especially, I have seen the countries from this part of the world, they have taken better like states. Maybe they didn't have any kind of things like economic or other stakes like the countries in that region they had. So it depends. It's only a few countries like Pakistan, they have their refugee crisis problem. So Malaysia, Indonesia, Muslim countries, few Sri Lanka, they have like really their voices has been heard. Their medias have really spoken hard about that. But it's also about the economy of the regional countries, I guess. That actually matters.
The journalists, so just before your question, journalists have played a good role in terms of agenda setting to the extent that the UN is paying attention. More countries are paying attention as a global issue, but they have room to do much better than they've done by particularly not stereotyping them, oversimplifying the problem, playing into fears of nativism and populism, presenting refugees as a security problem, because that is not necessarily an accurate presentation. There are a lot of good in refugees, and there are a lot of creative ways of going about dealing with the problem.
So my name is Inga Springe. I'm a journalist from Latvia. So I'm Europe side, and we of course face the same. We have maybe 15 refugees, which we picked up, which we want for our countries. But I have a question. But what could be like this global ultimate goal? What Europe kind of should do? I think from one side, maybe I will sound incorrect, but I don't think it would be a solution, just open borders and just take everyone who wants to come in. But what then we should do? European countries, still it means to say no to someone. And what could be then this kind of measurements when you decide, yes, we will take these people, but other people, you just die or drown when you will come here. But what other countries, like European countries, can do about it? Do you have any ideas? I don't know. I know it's a political issue.
The ideas have already been tried. I mentioned Jordan and the trade-off with allowing Jordan to manufacture certain goods, and they're providing employment for refugees, getting more integrated, getting education, and so on. That prevents more refugees from getting to the borders of Europe. So it's like a tap. You can choose whether to wait for the tap at the sink or stop it at the source, or help another country where the refugees are as a way of preventing them from going to Europe. So Europe has a responsibility of helping countries like Lebanon, like Jordan, that have huge, overwhelming populations of refugees who are likely sooner or later be at the borders of Europe.
I think one of the major concerns of UN, I should say UN is kind of a failure in this kind of situations in refugee crisis. The most important thing that has been talked about is kind of giving international pressure to the specific country that is actually creating the refugees, whether it is like Syria, whether it is Myanmar, or in that, these are different cases, of course. Syria is different and they have a war and all that. So international pressure is the main thing that has been talked about in Rohingya crisis also. There has been so much of international pressure going on. In Myanmar, there were some cut downs of the agreements and financial things if they do not stop doing this kind of thing. So first of all, I think making a country totally kind of alienated them from all kind of things if they keep doing this kind of thing, and which creates more refugees. That might kind of sort out the problem a bit. And what I think there, overall internationally, we don't have very strong policy against this kind of refugee crises that would actually lessen, or it cannot stop overnight, that could actually lessen these kind of things. So especially in, I can talk about the Asian countries, we don't have any strict policy about the refugees, what could be. We are just working on the UN resolutions or UN, whatever the laws UN has given, but each region has its own problems and they need their own kind of solution for that. So that is something to work for, I think.
My question for you. So you mentioned that when it comes to this kind of thing, the UN is kind of like a failing it's in its missions. So Cambodia itself has experienced humans against almost like a genocide, but it's not really. It's called crime against humanity, and the media had been reported at that time. So Cambodia, what happened in Cambodia? It was back 75 until 79. So the UN obviously failing in that case, but the other case of Rwanda, which happened in 1994, the UN also failed in that case. So as you a journalist and you know all this kind of thing, what is your word for the UN?
Oh, that is a big question. I don't know what is my word for UN, but I was really surprised when there was a representative from United Nations when in August and September this like mass killing genocide was going on inside Myanmar. So she went there to go to meet Aung San Suu Kyi. She was not allowed to enter the country. So that is a kind of thing actually United Nations, it has to make sure that they have this kind of authority. So if you cannot enter a country where the problem is going, where people are dying, people are living in severe human conditions, then what kind of a guardian you are? I have this question definitely.
And I know that sometimes they actually spend 80% of budget for some kind of their experts and their paperwork, and just 20% on the concrete work on the field. So if we as a journalist could argue that they change that habit or that procedure, that would be wonderful.
Dr. Bill, we'll take one more question, maybe two. Go ahead.
My question is, how much is terrorism or the threat of terrorism influencing the whole situation? This is more or less the first huge refugee crisis that is happening in Europe that is linked to terrorism, whether we want it or not. Two Two of the terrorists that blew themselves up in France at the soccer stadium entered through Croatia. They were registered in Croatia when they were coming in. So how do you see this connection?
Yeah, I believe that's the perfect stories and real threat to, of course, all of us who live in, no matter where in Europe. But from the other side, it's also perfect meat for during pre-election time when they even Merkel and especially this new Austria agenda, Prime Minister Kurz and all of these happened. And Brexit, I would argue that happened like one of the biggest topics where like we don't need terrorists, we don't need refugees, we don't care. We have a lot of problems here. We have a lot of, let's say, white people here who try to find their spot in this amazing kingdom. So why we need someone who just wants to come here and destroy our country? So there is no like concrete answer.
Yeah, I can add one thing. I was researching on Angela Merkel a few years back. So after she was very criticized for her decision after these incidents where the terrorist attacks were done happened in France. So she, I remind one of her quotes. She said that you cannot judge me on a decision when that I took when kids were dying, when so many people are in severe condition. So you cannot judge this decision of making so many people's life livable just because of one or two terrorist incidents. I don't think there's any kind of scale you can actually put both things at both sides. I'd just like to add one thing about this thing. In Bangladesh, we're having this kind of problem. Like, I mean, the Rohingyas, they're actually trying to snatch the local people's lands away to make their lives livable there. They're trying to do some kind of things that are really making that part of the country, the northern part, really unstable. So this is something comes with the whole package actually.
And I believe that the largest number of terrorist attacks were provided, let's say, by people who grew up actually in France or in Belgium or not by people who came in during refugee crisis.
Also, these two, they were from there, but they were going back.
I just want to add something. Last year we went to the post to IFC and they showed the whole path. It takes forever, like 2 years. But when they come out from the country, they're refugees, not if they're displaced within the country borders. And then there are like 2 to 3 years until they get accepted to go somewhere else. So it's like 6 years for terrorists to wait to do something. I think it's easier for them to find a way to become citizens to get faster.
We have one last question from any of our guests. Go ahead, we'll take these last two. We'll do you and then Shafek.
Okay. I've got a question about Egypt, which in the past has claimed to be the spokes country for the Arab region, although I guess Saudi Arabia is trying to do that too. So in the American media, we really haven't heard anything about the Rohingya crisis. And I'm just wondering, since these Rohingyas are Muslims, why some of these leading Arab countries have not brought up resolutions from the UN and sort of publicized this problem?
Should I answer? Yeah, that is something actually bothered me also because the Exodus actually started in August 25th, and I didn't find any US like mainstream media covering a proper report until like 2 or 3 weeks. Like in mid of September, I saw some good reports in CNN and Fox and others. So that is something actually US media has this problem, I guess. I shouldn't say directly. They do not go like in the other side of the Atlantic. What are the problems going on there? They are like concerned with the really petty things that can take some really important page of a newspaper or some news in a television. So these things actually the journalism educators, researchers, the journalists, they need to think about, I should say.
Indeed, we do. Thanks. Last question.
I have a question to Kazi. You mentioned the major power in this region, like India and China, should take no actions on the Rohingya refugee crisis. But how would you convince those big major powers to take actions on something that has nothing to do with them?
I wouldn't convince them actually. That is something humanitarian. So if a country thinks that some people are dying in my neighboring country and that doesn't bother me at all, I do not convince them.
All right, so lots more convincing and conversations to continue. Let's give another round of applause. A great way to start off our series this year. 2 weeks from today, we'll be back and we'll talk about India and China with Xiaofeng and Quran. So we hope you'll enjoy us for that. Thank you all.
Good job.
Thank you for not being so hard on me.
I'm a very nice person.
Ah, yeah, evidently. I didn't think you're that kind. I want to see what's like the